Hey, welcome back, and this video is going to be about inspecting and fixing the covering on the wings. And so first off, looking at the wings, they're in excellent condition. A couple of minor, I'll show you what minor looks like here. There we go. And you can see those minor wrinkles right there. That's what I call a minor wrinkle, a little bit on both sides. Other than that, the wing is in great condition. But there's one other thing you got to think about. Remember, there's a hole right here for the flaps, and we're going to have to cut that hole out, and I'm going to show you a special way to do that in just a second. So when we do that, when we cut this out, that may loosen some of this area around here, so we're going to have to iron that back down and iron down the cut in a certain way. So let me get out my hobby knife and get the irons hot, and I'll show you how to do that next. Okay, so I've got my hobby knife, I got my two irons. That's the trim iron right here, and this is the iron with the sock on it, and they're sitting there heating up. So what I've done is I took a fine tip Sharpie marker and I marked the four corners of where the hole is for the flap servo, and I drew a line in about a 1/4 inch or so, and then drew a box, and that's the box I'm going to cut out. Then I'm going to cut out each of the lines so that the covering can be folded down in and ironed down, because you want that, you don't want to just cut the whole thing out because it might lift up. So you leave a little bit to fold over and iron in on the inside, and that's what the trim iron is going to do. And then the flat iron will make sure that after this is all cut, that the outside all around this is still ironed down well. Let me cut that, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back, and then you can see how these are now cut and will fold down nicely. I also had to get a fresh new number 11 blade for my X-Acto knife, and using a sharp blade makes it a lot easier. Okay, so let me make sure the trim iron is hot, and we'll show you how to do that. Okay, I'm going to use a trim iron here. The trim iron doesn't get as hot as this one. This gets to 300, 350 degrees. This one only gets to about 110, 120. So I can test it the way my mom used to show me how to iron my clothes, which you lick your thumb and you go, okay, it sizzles, it's hot. So now all I'm going to do is use this trim iron upside down. I can't get any closer, but that's okay. So, and I'm going to use it to just trim it over and iron it down, and then turn it around. Make sure I got enough cord here. Trim it over and iron it down. And then push it over, iron that down. And lastly, push this over. Okay, that looks pretty good. Also doesn't look like the, well, maybe it has. The covering has come up just a little bit there, so I'm going to take my flat iron and just make sure that outside that hole right here, like that, and this thing is now set at about 340 degrees, so it's going to shrink, and any wrinkles. And remember, what you're looking for there is the grain of the wood to show through, and so that's now pretty good. It's flat, ironed down, good to go, not going to come back up. And so I'll do that for the other wing and be back in a little bit. Okay, so I'm looking for bubbles as opposed to wrinkles. Bubbles are bigger than wrinkles. And so I've got a few bubbles along the front edge. This is the other wing where I just cut out the aileron, the elevator, I'm sorry, the rudder servo hole. And there's some bubbles along here. There's also some bubbles underneath the red here. And so I'm going to have to see if I can get those out with the big flat iron. Remember, sure to hold the airplane carefully where it's been sheeted and you're holding a big piece of plywood. Iron's the best way to take this out. If it's a really small wrinkle, I will use the heat gun, but only after it's been ironed down will I use the heat gun. Okay, so here's a good place where it's now, that bubble is gone, but there's a really minor wrinkle left. Let me get all this done right here. Okay, so that's now done. Heat gun has two settings, low and high. I'm going to use high. And get out this last little bit of minor wrinkle here. Alright, so that's now pretty smooth. I don't see anything else to iron on this side. Actually, that side looks pretty good except for one little spot there. So I'm going to finish this wing and the other wing. You get the idea. The heat gun is the last resort. Make sure everything's stuck down. Once it's stuck down, you can use the heat gun to get out the really small wrinkles. So I'll be back in a minute. Okay, sometimes when you use the heat gun on some really small wrinkles, you won't be able to see the pattern underneath the wood. So after I use the heat gun, I like to take the flat iron and iron that down to make sure that the glue is against the grain of the wood and you can actually see the grain of the wood sitting there. So that had a bunch of wrinkles and now it's nice and smooth and you can see the grain of the wood. Okay, the last part of the inspection is anywhere it's folded over, especially like here on the edges. They didn't leave much to fold over, but it's folded over well. Let's see. Alright, I see a couple of spots here where the fold over is not down. So I'm just going to touch it real quick with my trim iron. And just a quick little swipe with the trim iron will get that down nice and tight. Actually, I missed one spot here. Let me get one more spot here. Okay. So the other places to look for folds is around the ailerons. And those folds all look good. This end, folds all look good. The trailing edge of the aileron and the flap here is another place where there's usually a fold. Those folds all look good. High quality covering, I must admit. Okay, that looks good. Okay, checking the elevator is very important. You don't want this coming off in any ways. First off, I do another test here to make sure that the CA hinges are good and tight, and they appear to be. I got some small bubbles here. I'm going to get those out. I'm going to probably touch all of this with a big flat iron. Just make sure it's all glued down well. Be back in a minute. Okay, the other thing I did was I took the foam off from around this control horn and used the big flat iron to iron all that down nice and smooth. And remember, you only got one elevator. You can't live without an elevator. You can live without a rudder. You can live without ailerons. You can't live without an elevator. Airplanes will not fly without an elevator. So, elevator's done. This is pretty good. So I'm going to make sure this is good, and I think that's it for the covering of the flying surfaces. I'll do a separate video on the covering for the fuselage. Stay tuned.